Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our Thursday class, week number two. As I promised you last week, we are fortunate tonight to have Kelly Janasek from the University Library with us. And in the first half of class tonight, Kelly will walk you through a presentation on how to do public administration related research. And this is important because I'm sure you've done research in the past, but as members of an MPA program, it's really important that you know how to do that research for public administration, some of the public administration databases that are useful for you. And Kelly really is very much our resident expert on all of those issues. And so we're very fortunate to have her here tonight. I have made you a co-host, Kelly, and so you should be able to share your screen. And I'll go ahead and shut up and turn the floor over to Kelly. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. Um, Good evening, all. I work with questions, so don't be shy. If I don't catch you in the chat because I have screens open all over the place, just interrupt me and say I have a question. I'm going to make this fairly informal. It's a smaller group, easy enough to do. I'm going to cover a lot of things, and we have a little exercise to see if you understand. And as of last night or Tuesday night, there was things that I don't know that I got across as well as I should. So let's try again, okay? So let me share. I think you are seeing the same thing I'm seeing. I always have to check. Yes. Nope, not quite. There. Okay. Um, I put it in a PowerPoint only to make sure I don't forget anything because I have done this so many times, I sometimes forget what I did and didn't say. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to review some research basics. I assume everybody knows them, but not everybody does. So I want to make sure we all have the baseline. Then I'm going to talk about how to conceptualize your topics. If you're assigned something to do at work, say they want you to do this, or you're going to write a paper and you need to define something, taking a minute and thinking about this will make a big difference because when we get down to review your sources, it may help you start in the right place from the beginning instead of jump around. I'm going to talk about AI in research and the ramifications of it, at least as it currently exists. As we speak, it's constantly changing, and we'll see what happens. We're going to talk about sources. I'm going to talk about different types because it's back to once you figure out your topic, sometimes you need a particular time base, and that may make a difference over what source you start with. Then I'm going to talk about how you discover information. You no longer have to look a subject up and find something. No, you throw it out there like Google against the wall and see what runs down. And we've got so many more ways to discover information, to expand what you're looking at, to find what you need. Your program uses the Publication Manual of the American Psychological Association, or APA citations. And I want to make sure you understand how they work here. They are probably, in my mind, better than a lot of the other of the 65 others that exist because they actually are very contemporary and show lots of ways of doing some of the social media citing, talking to a person citing, all that kind of things. And you need to cite things you've used to get to where you are in your point because you don't want to be considered for plagiarism. And you don't want to get into the fake news area. If you can prove you saw something, that makes a big difference. Are there any questions or anything you expected to hear tonight that I'm not talking about? No? I got some head shakes. Okay. Then research basics, vocabulary. You're using a computer. It's stupid. Don't let it lie to you. It's stupid. What words you type in or what words it's going to throw back at you. So think about how many words you can use to describe a city. Could be a municipality, could be a county, could be a village, it could be a town. So you want to start thinking about your vocabulary because the computer can't do that for you. One of the other things I want to talk about is subject terms, which is at the bottom of the screen. Sometimes you'll be in the middle of looking at references and suddenly you will see a subject term that you didn't know, and that's more precise to what you're doing. And I'm going to show you ways to get more precise of what you're looking for. When you conceptualize the topic, you need to think about how contemporary it is, how big it is, or how small it is. I have quite often will have somebody say, I need to write a paper on democracy. Okay, I have a 12 volume set on democracy. That's a little too big. So we're going to talk about ways to make your topic more precise or a nuance of your topic that you may want to talk about and what best sources to go with. Sometimes you're too small, but that isn't as true as you'd think. Question I had was, I need the relationship between philosophy and the painted ponies. And you'll be happy to know there's 2 articles on that topic. There's not a lot, but there are 2 articles on that topic. So you never know what you will find and what you may not find. But in the discovery process, there are ways of adding to making your topic more robust if you need to, or help you focus it and make it narrower so you can work with it. Computer searching, it's called Boolean logic. It's still math. So by default, when you type terms in, it's putting and between them. Don't use a comma. Even Google uses this. So if you type in public administration, it's going to look for all the articles that contain both the word public and administration. Because it's by default, it looks for and. It tries to find the relationship. A way to get around that is do phrase searching. My favorite trick, put it in quotation marks. So if I put quote public administration unquote, I will only find those articles where public administration words are together. Not all the articles that do public and then maybe talk about administration, or all the articles about administration that may talk about the public, because that's not what I want. I want public administration. So phrase searching becomes very important. Not is a filter system. Don't use it very often, except if you're in the middle of the search and you're finding all this stuff about, I don't know, some African country that isn't anything you're interested in. You could say not and take and put that word in, and it will take all those citations out. It'll take those words out. I don't have anything currently, but when the European Union was considering Greece and all the economic issues, everything was about European Union and Greece or Greek. So I said, not Greece, not Greek. And I got rid of all those extra things and I got European Union. So sometimes there's a publishing flourish, shall we say, on a subtopic that may not be, you want to get past that. We pay for the databases. You guys help us pay for almost 330 databases. They are not cheap. Probably close to $2 to $3 million worth of information there. What comes with value, like filters and refinements allowed. You can limit your topic by date. You can limit to scholarly peer reviewed. You can limit it by location. You can limit by subject words. It has ways to take your 10,000 hits and get them down to something that's workable. So be aware of those filters and refinements. They work really well. Now, I mentioned cities or towns or villages. Or is a good way to expand your vocabulary. So if you have a lot of synonyms, use or. Okay. Do I have a good one? Budgeting or planning. No, that's a good example. I'm trying to think what a good example would be. We'll come up with one. We'll figure it out. But sometimes you have a lot of synonyms, and that or kind of comes in handy to get all those words looked for, and then and them against your subtopic. We talked about phrase searching, subject terms. The value added to these databases that we purchase is they're not just looking for the words that are used. A human looked at that article, determined that article was about this subject, which means they may not have used those words. So I can't show it anymore because it's gone. It's disappeared off the screen a little bit, but we were looking for environmental policy in California. So we did quote environmental policy, quote, and California. And we limited to subject term environmental policy, and pops up very much on the front screen was a bill that the governor at that time was having being gone through the legislature about climate change. In other words, it was environmental policy, but they didn't use those words. It was a policy, a bill to change climate change, environmental policy. So you now see where the subject comes into play, that sometimes you find things that, like, oh, wow, this is really what I want, but those weren't the words I used. Or those were the subject that I want, and that's precisely what I want. Google does not allow you to do subject searching, and it doesn't have a whole lot of filters other than date. But you could use you can use the phrase searching in Google searching or any other search engine. Questions about this? Does this make sense? Okay. Let's talk about your topic. To understand the topic, sometimes you don't realize how big it is. I've had people come to me and say, I want to write stuff about Medicaid. Well, doggone it, that's a heck of a big topic. The law itself is, I don't know how many thousands of pages. So we have what we call subject encyclopedias. And in your discipline, you've got several. So you can look at a topic and read a little chapter, 5 to 10 pages about it, and it will give you subtopics. It will define it for you. It'll give you vocabulary. And if it's a really good subject encyclopedia, which is what we tend to buy, it will give you a nice little set of references at the end to start with research ideas already. So I'm going to talk about those because I find, oh, the example happened, was that this week already? Yes. I'm working on display on graphic novels, and I wanted the history of the comics, the comic books, the graphic novel. So I put it in a subject encyclopedia, and out comes this very nice Journal of Popular Culture and gave me the history of how they came into being and how long they've been around. So it's a good way to get an idea about something. The other thing we have is something called annual reviews. These are journal articles, but they're more on, they take a topic within a discipline and they talk about where it is and where they kind of expect it to go. You don't use it very often unless you have a topic that's cutting edge. So you might want to think about those annual reviews, and I'll show you how you can find those. The other kind of article that you might see when you're in a database is a literature review. Some of the databases allow you to limit to literature reviews. And what they are sometimes is a critical review article that looks at the literatures out there and what's still missing. Sometimes it's a background of the literatures that came to date for this topic. So it might lead you to other sources. Along with this literature review, you'll start to see authorship. You'll see a lot of articles by this one author because people who start writing tend to stay in the same subject and write about all they can about it so they don't have to relearn something all the time. So when you find an article you really like, look at the author and then look for them to see what other articles they may have written that might give you more information. Or we can track the author. Who cited them? They may have written about the same topic. Who are they citing? There's lots of ways to play with authorship these days that make a big difference. And because you're in politics, it's not uncommon for a lot of your authors to go out and work for an NGO, a non-governmental organization or a government agency, and create reports on the topic. So by tracking that author, you may find more than articles because they are well published in an area. I have something going on for global studies right now. They're following a particular ambassador. They want all his articles that he's published. Well, he's published articles, he's published reports, and he's published this, that, the other thing. But by tracking that person, we found a whole lot of information. You also need to be aware of the publication. There are the things that are in the databases. Not all of them what I call great because there's a lot of open access things out there and basically anybody can publish and they do. But there are gold standard and green standard of open access journals, which are considered quality. So if you're not sure about your journal, don't be shy. I'll show you a way to ask a librarian, what is the quality of this journal? Should I trust it or not? I'll tell you how bad it's gotten in the publishing industry. Several of the major research publishers of journals, their journals basically been hacked. Somebody came in on the editorial board, took over, and they're bringing in all their buddies to publish in that journal. But they're not true scholarly peer reviewed articles. They're just buddies publishing for them. So we know of one publisher that's taken down 400 of their journals, another one that's taken 700 of their journals down because they don't want to be publishing when they say it's a peer reviewed when it's not really a peer reviewed article. I'll take it even further. Before the hacking of the publications themselves, publishers would hear from, or an editor of a journal would hear from someone that says, you got this peer reviewed article by so and so, and I'm trying to reproduce it, and I can't seem to get the same kind of results. Can you ask what's wrong? Was there something missing in the article? They follow up, the editorial who do real hardcore peer reviewed stuff, the scholar stuff, will go to that author, ask how the results, what's wrong here. Somehow it made it through the peer review process, but the author will admit it's fake. They got fake results. They just wanted some results. They just published it. The publisher says, oh no, not in our publication. They will remove that article. It no longer exists electronically. If I had it in paper, I may still have it. But some of them take it even a step further. Any of their authors who've published other articles and cited that bad article, they'll remove those articles also as bad research articles. So the publishers are very conscious of what's going on because of the web and hacking and all this kind of things. It's become very interesting over what you're getting. And I will say this about authorship. We learned this week, one of my colleagues found out she published a book. She didn't write that book, but because of AI, it created a book for her. And I'm going to talk about AI in a minute, but now you're seeing false things being created because AI feels it has to answer the question. So authorship becomes very interesting. Questions about any of this? I don't see any hands.
I guess I have this like question about publications. When they become aware that they publish something that's, like you said, incorrect, aside from removing uh, the publications, do they release a statement acknowledging that they made a mistake? And like, do they take any sort of accountability? Like, how was this able to get through the process?
They don't tend to do accountability, but even in the old days when we had paper, they would send us a errata sheet that would stick in. So it's not uncommon online. It maybe in that whatever issue it is, it says this article da 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 will no longer be exist. They won't explain the why fors and wherefores, but they do kind of acknowledge that it's no longer published.
Okay, so the acknowledgement that it's no longer being published is kind of like they're a
Yeah.
way of kind of taking a responsibility, right?
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha,
That's about as
gotcha.
close
Thank
as you were going to get. Yep.
you.
That's a good question. Anything else? Okay. So let's talk about AI. There's these library databases, Google Scholar, and AI generated searching. Okay. The databases are based on a topic, a subject. When they take on that subject, they tend to index every journal, for the most part, from issue one, page one to current that cover that discipline. Now, I won't lie to you, they don't cover everything. So, in public administration abstracts, what we're going to talk about, there is a management journal that's really business, but they cover enough things that they will selectively include articles in their index to that journal. But their purpose is to cover all the articles published in the discipline by the journals or publications. Google Scholar, meanwhile, is author driven. Someone who writes an article and basically wants tenure or whatever, will put it out there. And as people cite it, they'll keep putting their Google Scholar in there to show the value of that article. They will not show every article published. What they're doing is based on the author and that one article. Because I know there's several, that's where we found the book that our colleague wrote. It's suddenly Google Scholar. She's like, but I didn't write this book. So because someone asked AI generated is where this comes into play. AI is stupid yet. It will get there, but it's got bad. It's creating a lot of false information because it hasn't been allowed to say, I cannot answer that. That does not exist. It creates things. It takes a person who looks like they wrote in this area. They look for an article title that looks good to what you're asking, and then they find a journal that publishes in that area and it makes a citation. False does not exist. But once it's in AI, it keeps self-generating the information. So it's now falsely out there for the world to see. And she backed it up by finding this article in a database that we were rather shocked to see it in. So that's the problem with AI. It's not good for research so much. It will help you maybe outline your topic a little better, help with phrasing to think about things. We think it does fairly well in that area, but it's not for getting sources for research because the other factor is we pay for those library databases. They have firewalls. AI cannot get past those firewalls. So it cannot pull the good scholarly or good research that's out there. And truthfully, if you ask it to write a paper, you need to read that paper, make sure it's sensible and critically thought out, because you can still tell which are AI written. It's very easy to see them. Let's put it that way. Okay. I was talking to an English professor today. He says, yeah, I have one. It's 100% AI. There's no way they wrote that any way, shape, or form. Through the software, 100% AI. He will allow 25% AI to set up whatever, but not 100%. So you just need to be aware that it's coming, and we know it's coming in our world, but it's not there. It's like when they introduced the World Wide Web and Wikipedia. It took a good 8 years for Wikipedia to be acceptable till it became a legitimate research item. It takes a while to create something. And if it's creating false information and regenerating it, that's going to be a real problem in all our futures. Does this help you understand how AI all fits in things right now? Do you have any questions? No? Okay. Let's talk about different types of information. Articles by far is probably the most common type of a thing that you will look for. It shows you what they're good for. They come in various subtypes, and that's really what I want to mention to you. Some of my disciplines, it doesn't matter. They only want one kind. They want research, scholarly peer reviewed. You guys, as an applied field, probably have other needs. I'm hoping you're not doing the one on the bottom, like Daily Express, Mirror, Star. Those are what we call regs, gossip. Yes, libraries collect them because they're pop culture, but you better not be using them unless you're doing the study on them. The next one up, it looks like newspapers. News is very popular in your area because it's probably the most contemporary pre-publication of an article kind of thing. I'm also talking like social media kind of things. There's a lot of online news services. They're instantaneous. Now with everybody filming everybody on their phones, you can see it as soon as it happens. But it's a good way to say the city council met last night and you want to know the results of what they talked about because you knew there was a couple agenda items that might be of interest. The news should be able to provide that information for you. So sometimes knowing that it's so contemporary, that may be where you start. The next one up is my favorite for you guys, is what I call trade or professional journals. You see, Journal of ABA, American Water Works Association, or the PA Times, the Public Administration Times. These are journals or professional magazines put out for professionals in their association. I have I have several in my profession, and I read them because I've got the research ones and I've got the applied ones. So they're really good for how we did this, how we failed at this, what we will do in the future, how we overcame this. They're good for applied situations in a situation, and we have a database that really does index them very, very well. Because in the business world, professional or trade publications become very key to know what's going to be in the future of business. So, Journal of Law and PA Times. The one that probably, as you continue the program, you'll probably use more are what I call the scholarly peer reviewed. Remember when I told you about that guy who was questioned about his scholarly, how he got to his results and it was false? Scholarly peer reviewed means it's kind of like your professor grading your papers. Most high end scholarly peer reviewed used one or two or three peer reviewers to determine the value. Is it arranged correctly? Are the tables? Is the methodology sound? Is the sources, lit review, all that stuff? I know why it's failing because there aren't enough people left to do literature reviews or peer reviewing anymore. They're calling anybody to do peer reviews because there aren't enough people out there to do peer reviews for the articles that exist. COVID kind of created a little problem with that. But like public policy and administration put out by the American Association of Public Policy Administrators is a peer-reviewed journal. Those are scholarly researched articles. And it's one of the areas that you can refine by. Do we understand all the types of articles that exist out there? Are we good? Probably the next kind of information you might look for is probably a report or a book, one off study kind of thing. Um, there are different kinds out there. The first one, The Promise and the Pitfalls of Performance Informed Management, is actually a book that studies that. It's a couple hundred pages, chapters in it that kind of might help you do research. Americans Divide and Recover is actually a government document. Up until recently, the biggest publisher in this country was the United States government. That's no longer true. Um, Actually, I'd be surprised if I go try to find this one today. I bet I can't find it. The current political climate has cleansed a lot of the government information that pisses librarians off because your tax dollars paid for this research. And why can't we publish it and get the information? But because it's haves and have-nots, it has a diversity issue. And a lot of websites from the government are down while they, what they call, clean up or cleanse anything that has a diversity issue. I will show you how to find the government data things, and we're keeping a list of what we're aware of that's no longer there. Librarians are actively trying to save this information. So I can't tell you how many good things are gone. The one that upsets me probably more than anything that now allow insurers to whatever they want to do. It used to keep track of how much it cost for fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, all those kind of weather things, how often they happened, how much damage they did. So it was a way to kind of figure out your insurance premium should be. And guess what? That data is now gone. They can now charge you whatever. Okay. I talked about the encyclopedia. So the Sage Encyclopedia of Public Administration is one of them. Takes a chapter, breaks it down, gives you subheadings to get smaller topics, refers you to other subtopics, gives you vocabulary, sources to start with. That's an example of a book. Now, reports are what I call out there on the internet for free. A lot of publishers, the US government being a good example, have gone and started publishing. It costs money to publish in paper and distribute, so the internet's free. But when you look at it, you need to see the editorial oversight and bias. So if it's a think tank, they obviously have an agenda. So there's ways of finding that information out. If you have you're finding things and their about statement doesn't make any sense who they are, I would question who they are because anybody can publish anything on the internet. We've had some pretty industrial, smart little eighth graders put their papers up and make them look like real reports so people will, buy them to use them. So they're making money on the side on their eighth grade paper. It's amazing what you'll see out there. So you need to actually look at it. So it's getting back to authorship helps a lot, who the organization is. And I'm going to show you some ways to bypass this for editorial, some acceptable organizations that are publishing that make good reports that they've been publishing for decades and we know who they are and what they do. Okay? Are you familiar with reports and books and reports? Okay? People. And yes, that's a children's book. It's pretty cool. People are a source of information more so than they ever have. Sometimes they know stuff before it gets published or what's happened. So you call after the city council meeting and get the report from somebody who was there versus waiting till the next day when the news comes out. Sometimes they're harder to find or get a hold of. It can be verbal or social media. Good organizations, when you click on that about them, will talk about who their people are that are doing the research for them and what their specialties are. So it allows you to connect. They may not talk to you because you're a student, but in your profession, you might be able to get a hold of them. APA shows you how to cite any of these kind of things. Probably the least usage, unless you've got something that's very, very, very contemporary. Statistics, one of my favorites. Data. Problem is, it's just numbers. You got to interpret it. Okay. The top one is from the state of California. The bottom one's from the US government. It's probably gone now because it's in education statistics. I probably need to look to see if it's even available. They closed down the Department of Education, so there's nobody to gather the data anymore. They're time series kind of thing. There's long term. That's what hurts about this. Does anybody know the longest running data in the United States government?
Not at all, but if I had to make a guess, maybe the labor,
The which one?
the Department of Labor.
No, they're not the oldest data out there. I was looking for the chat. How do we seat people in Congress? By the census. Every 10 years, we take a census count to give
Wow.
representation.
Yeah, that was right in
Okay.
my face. It's right in my face. The most basic. The most basic.
Yeah, the most basic.
Mhm.
There used to be as many as 15 different census, including a census of government, but a lot of them have kind of disappeared. I'm sorry, I'm catching up on the chat. I didn't catch it. Do we have access to searchable trade journals? Yes, we will show that. Restructure, I'm not sure where that is.
I was making a comment when you said that the government was cleansing their,
Cleansing.
they would
Yeah,
rather say
restructure.
restructuring, right?
Let's be real, they're cleansing things.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Linguistics, right? Linguistics.
I can't not show my bias. Librarians cannot show their bias with this. We are not
I agree.
educators.
I agree. I agree.
Okay. Um, so that gives you an idea of how much data is out there, and we have a way to give you access to it and show you what's out there. Questions at this point, and I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see your faces and see if anybody has any other questions about the basics, because now I want to go into discovering the information. Did it make sense about talking about articles are quicker than, say, scholar peer-reviewed research, which may take, I'm still working on project 12 years in the making, and I'm not done yet, and I haven't published it yet, but it may take a couple years to do it, then get it through the peer review process another year, and then it gets published. Not going to be anything that happened in the last 4 years. Okay. COVID was an exception, but the publishers who published medical kind of information realized the significance of it, and they really worked to push it out and make it publicly free in access. So that's the only example I know of that happened that way. Okay. They don't come along. Are we ready to talk about discovery of information? You got so much more than I ever had when I was doing research. It's kind of scary. Okay. Okay. The first thing I need to talk about is which one of the 330 databases are you going to use? So, if you haven't been to the library webpage, we have what we call research guides. Every department, program, degree has a research guide. Notice that you've got one. There's your address. It's a .com. It's not .edu. You can no longer trust that as a web address. If we put on the campus web server and we want to change something on our research guide, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to do that. Not in my world. I can change this in class right now because if that's what needs to be corrected, that's what I do. Okay? So I'm going to put in the chat the link. Give me a minute. I need to go somewhere else here. So you could have it. I would bookmark it. Does this answer all your questions? No, but it should answer a majority. But if you're saying you're doing something on real nonprofits or church groups, I have other sources. I don't necessarily bring those out. But let me know. And when I show you the guide, we'll show you how we can create something for you. Okay. Okay. Let me go ahead. Hold on a minute. I need to open up a screen because I don't have a screen open that I can, where'd my screens go? Okay. Sometimes when you try to share, it goes weird places. So you need to make sure you're fairly accurate here. Okay. This is the library webpage. Our version of Google is this one search. So you will find research and reports from organizations that are probably a little bit more credible than a Google search, but not necessarily because it's getting a lot of junk dumped in it. Okay. You can go to databases if you know what you want, but if you go to research guides, I think I have it. And you type in either PPA or public administration, bing, 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 if you forgot that bookmark. And here it comes. And there it is. Okay. When I'm going to show some things to you, and give me a minute. I got somebody trying to talk with me. I hope you. Teaching class online, so as long as it doesn't die. So, okay. So you didn't have to see my chat. Okay. I talked about APA citing. Here are some examples that help you. Truthfully, it's worth going on Amazon and buying a used copy of the publication manual, the American Psychological Association, 7th edition. You want the 7th edition. If you get in a bind, there's some real basic things here. that'll give you through the thing. But we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. In some classes, you have to write an annotated bibliography. So this is how to work that. You can email me, you can schedule an appointment, or because I sleep, see the button at the bottom, Ask a Librarian? 24/7, 365 days a year, there is a librarian behind that tab. Now, admittedly, at 2 a.m., when most of you do your research, because we know this, librarians around the world know this, it's probably a librarian, probably maybe New Zealand, Australia, answering your question. I kid you not. I do Monday mornings at 11 and I get all the Brits because it's 2 a.m. in the morning for them. They will help you. And since a lot of this is very common, they will answer to the best of their ability. If they cannot do that, they will give us a tag and they will tell you that they're tagging us back. And the next business day that we come to work, we will get back and try to answer that question because it might be something unique to us that they can answer, whatever. So, yep, we maintain that 24/7 business because you guys seem to actually it helped the library. We used to be open till 1 a.m. and nobody came because you guys, by the time you went home, is when you had your questions. So we don't have as many hours. Yes, it's not a bot. I won't lie to you, it's not a bot. It is a human. So it pops up on research guides, one search when you're some places it'll pop up. So if you need to ask it. That's this. Oops, where are we? Because you're coming in from home, if you're having access issues, you might go through that page. Excuse me. I could turn my sound off for a minute. Mute myself if I can. Sorry about that. Sniffles in the building, happening a lot. So this helps with seeing what you might need to think about. If you're having issues accessing things, downloading things, whatever, that's what you can use. Okay. Um, I mentioned topics like if you're dealing with churches, say, or nonprofits of a unique kind. These are PPA topics that have come along, come up, and so we do a little dig. These are legitimate, good web sources. So budgeting taxes comes up because of the budgeting class. If you're dealing with city and counties, here's some good sites. We've had questions about gender inclusivity in organizations. Little new, we got a brand new book that kind of looked good. Some sources on nonprofits, including a new one. Transportation comes up quite a bit. Those are extra topics that I just hear about. And so I find these sources and I know they're legitimate, good sources. I did the Google search, although I didn't have to Google it. I kind of knew. I'm a librarian. I know this stuff. If you have the policy class and you need to find policies, here's a list of databases that work better. Note that the Congressional Digest and the Public Agenda tend to be more national. A lot of them are all national. Some of them you can find state. But the politics database would probably be the best place to start because it has a sub database in it called policy. Okay. So just so you know, it's what we call the gray literature or those reports that come out from organizations on policies. Then depending on what kind of area you might be dealing, here's some other places to go. And then I know you guys might need this. Here are some think tanks, and librarians put these together. American Policy Directory. So if you look up a topic and see what policy making think tanks or organizations are out there, that's the kind of data that's there. I'm not going to recreate what these guys have to work on because it's work. So Oregon and Tulane. So take advantage of it if you want to look for policy, and then it'll lead you to an organization. And then you need to look to see what they're trying to influence. It's back to that bias. So if you see a report, you have the organization, you're not sure who they are, you can definitely go to these policy directories and find out what they're leaning towards or trying to train us on or trying to educate us on. Okay? And that's under policy sites. If you're in the research methods class and you need data or research methods, we've got a database. We got lots of data. When I talked about the government statistics stuff, the data sets, this page has the links to the things that are gone or we're not sure where they are. I need to update it. Some of them have been totally shut down. I need to, the Department of Education, I think pretty much is shut down. They've taken everything down. I need to update that. Um, what happens is there's a bunch of librarians out there that, like I said, are trying to mine it. But if you look up a topic, say homelessness, page has been deleted. It has not been deleted. I did not delete that page. Where did it go? Uh-oh. Somebody stole my LibGuide. Oh no. Somebody stole my LibGuide. Well, yeah. Okay. I have to go fix that right after this class is over. I don't know what happened to it. Somebody stole my LibGuide. It's not there anymore. Supposedly, there's one that gives you that data. Otherwise, we do have iPoll if you're looking for polling data or policy map. That's really kind of a nice one. Their latest thing is a lot of health data. They gathered all that health data from the feds before they took it away, and it maps it. So you can look at it, a place like a zip code. You can find what kind of transportation they have, how close are hospitals, demographics. It kind of allows you to map out things so you can, and it uses what they call GIS, Global Information Service mapping kind of data. It's kind of a fun one, actually. The Statistical Abstract of the United States was the longest running data that gave all the statistics the government did. I don't know what it means. And the US data and statistics, of course, I don't know where they are in the government publishing, if they're even being published. I have to follow that up. If you have the class on evaluations, databases that might work, actually, this is something Google or OneSearch is good at. But these are the words you need to put in there in quotations. Program evaluation, put a star on there. So it's a program evaluation, a program evaluations, anything that comes after that N. Put it in quotes. Program assessment in quotes. Evidence-based practice in quotes. A little star there. Do that in Google and your topic or your whatever kind of policy you're looking for. OneSearch would probably be where I'd start first because you might get something more precise than something just out there. You might have not have as many things to look at if you do it versus a Google search where you have billions of hertz. Do not do environmental policy and program evaluation. It's like 10 billion. It's off the charts. Those are the things that I wanted to point out that are also on this research guide to help you find stuff. So let's take a minute and see, does anybody have any other questions at this point? Because now I want to go into the sources tab, where all the, how to find the articles, how to find the books, how to find the reports, the more specific type of information types that I talked about. Are we good? We're good. I see some thumbs up. Good, good. Okay. Let me go back to my guide. Get sources. See this tab? Get sources. And actually, this probably will be the one you want to bookmark because you can always go to the tab for home, whatever. Okay. Like I said, we have over 300 databases. For public administration, these are probably the best, and they're what I consider the best to the lowest. Public policy, you probably already saw those. I had them on another screen, but here they are. Things about current issues. Ingenta Connect is actually a table of contents service. So as soon as that journal is going to be published, they put out the table of contents. So if you're tracking a publication, you can find out what it published most likely before it ends up in an index, before someone humanly read the article and gave it its subject headings. I put the California Journal of Politics and Public Issues in there because I need to always find it and I never know where it is. So there it is. I'm going to show these, but I want to mention again these encyclopedias. Remember, I talked about those. Here's the Sage Handbook of Public Administration. What it will do is take you to a page that you need to make sure your single sign-on is turned on so you can access this stuff. Anything that has a lockbox on it is only available to CSULB students, faculty, and staff. We pay for the 50,000 of you. Okay, I know this is being recorded, but I will talk really fast so they won't know this. The publishers won't know this. Because we are a federal and state government depository, we are open to the public. To access that stuff, we got to give them a computer. So we have open access computers for 90 minutes where you can get into anything you can get in 90 minutes and use the databases. My recommendation is come on a Saturday. There's not too many people here. So if you want to use some of these databases later after you graduate, that'd be a recommendation. Public libraries sometimes have some of these things. Okay, but you didn't hear that from me because they don't want us to give this to the world. Meanwhile, because I'm single signed long on, I'm going to go Sage. This is the encyclopedia. It's broken down. This one's broken down by types of topics here. But say I want something specific. I want reform. So it takes me within the encyclopedia. It's administrative reform. Okay. It tells me other topics that I might want to look at. It breaks it down in public administration, defines it for me. It calls concepts and processes, and concepts and outcomes. Whoops, where'd it go? Little mouses. Organization of whatever part 11 is. I'd have to read it. Gives me a source. I read through this. I now have terminology. I now have a source, and truthfully, you can cite this. You see that little cite button by APA? I can copy this to a clipboard and cite it. I see problems with it right now. It doesn't give me my pages. I have to have my pages from page so-and-so to so-and-so. It also doesn't give me my volume, which is a problem. I may need to talk to them about that, but I needed to have know the first page, 561, and the last page, 564. It's important. APA is kind of fussy about that. But I can go back to the contents or summary and find that page and see what volume it's in, since it's a multi-volume set. Okay. It doesn't have an author. This article doesn't. This one does. So it shows me where it's published. You don't have to give place anymore. You just give the publisher and the DOI. We're going to talk about that. Man, APA in the 7th edition created the DOI, the Digital Object Identifier. And all scholarly peer-reviewed stuff, including book chapters, have a DOI number. And you know what? You can now search by those DOI numbers and find the article and or book without having to know anything more than that. So it becomes part of the citation. So it's very important to know about, and we're going to talk about those more in a minute. So that's encyclopedia. Close that screen off. Close that screen off. And I got to go back to get my PPA. So political science, public administration is a subtopic of political science. So it's definitely that's, I think, a 10-volume set. The International Encyclopedia of Social Sciences is a 50-volume set. So it's, they're in there, but There's a lot more. Um, Questions about finding books, subject encyclopedias. Are we doing okay? Okay. Let's show you some databases and how they work. To me, your top three databases are the Public Administration Abstracts, which basically only does scholarly peer-reviewed journals. It does a few trade public or professional journals, but the reality is it's a very small database of those journals that are public administration oriented. Also note it's very international because public administration is an international concept. What they do in Britain in internet and public administration is not what they do in the States in public administration. So you need to be aware that that does that. Politics database obviously has public administration journals in it, but it also has political science databases and policy things in it. Okay. It's a very big database. Probably, I should move these. ABI Inform is probably the one that I recommend second to public administration abstracts. It's called the American Business Index officially. It started in 1972. It's older than Blazes. It's got a lot of stuff in it. But it really truly indexes the trade and professional journals. It does a lot of media things that are out there for the public to see. It's a very comprehensive database, and I will show you how to limit it to the public sector so you don't get all the business junk because you don't want corporation stuff. Okay. But let me show you the public administration abstracts. I got my single sign on turned on. There it is. Okay. This is an EBSCO product. EBSCO changed their product to go AI in August. Truthfully, we think it's a bunch of crap now. It's a very bad database. Their vendor. We're not liking it. But it's what we got, and that's where public administration abstracts is. They're the only ones that index it. So you type in your topic, and I'm going to do water and lead because you know that's coming up everywhere. Well, not as much as it was, but I can right away do just the scholarly stuff. Do not ever do the link full text. We have over 300 databases. It may be full text somewhere else. I'll show you how to jump ahead and get it somehow without it being here. Yeah, I'm just going to search. So let's filter it, if I can filter it. I really get tired of this guy. Okay. I've only got 48. That's interesting. There should be more than 48, and I know there's more than 48, but that's what it's giving me. Let's try peer-reviewed. I have 42. Let's do all dates. Let's do the last 12 months. I got nothing. Last 5 years. There should be a fair amount. I've got 4. There should be more than that. Okay. Like I said, I'm not real impressed by it. I'm going to take my peer-reviewed. Let's take off my peer-reviewed. Make it bigger. Because 4, I'm going to clear all filters. Clear all filters. Because you want more than 4 for the most part. 48. So as you saw, I had other filters. So maybe you want, this is one does not do location. But it does, they all do subject. So water management, I would want water supply. Ooh, 143 topics here. Water supply management, water use, water utility. I can do California. Ooh, let's do the California. I may have 0 left because of those other topics. It gives me 19. Well, there's only 2. There's 2 of them on California. Go back. What it gives you is the title, the article, the authors, what journal are its year, volume, issue, pages. It gives you also a summary or an abstract of what it's about. It also gives you the subject headings. And so if you like this one, you might look at the subject headings. Maybe you need sewage purification to take care of the issue. The authors are allowed to provide words, and sometimes that might get you something. But say you decide you want it. Nope, there's the DOI right there. Okay. I have a couple things I can do. I don't see it full text here. I can check to see if it's full text in our library. Do 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 do. I need a theme song like in Jeopardy. It takes forever to load this one. Okay. Can you guys see it? Yes. It shows that yes, we do have this article. We have it in this guy who is a publisher of journals, not a database. So now I can get the article. I would have it full text. I have it. Okay. Um, I can cite it here, or I could have cited it back in the database itself. And we're going to talk about, you can copy this to a clipboard, start collecting. There's management software for gathering citations. I'm going to talk about a little bit. So you can start collecting them. You can email it to yourself. You can text it to yourself. Permalink will give you the whatever, but you got to go in here to get it. Now, I don't know how many of you have been online and you do a Google Scholar and it says $50 for the article, please. Don't buy it, doggone it. We probably already have it for one thing. Or two, we will get it for you for free. We will pay the $50, which we don't have to pay quite often, but sometimes we do. We will get it for you. Okay? So here's the PDF. I can cite it again. Figures are, here's your impact on how quality of the journal. 2.5 is, it's okay, but 4 and 5 is good. So that gives you an idea of the article, getting to the article if we don't have it in-house like that one. If I go back to my results and this article, peer-reviewed article, has been cited because it was published in 2024. It's European, just so you know. But it's been cited four times since that article's been published. Maybe they wrote about something that you might want to deal with. These are links to those articles. That's you're tracking by citing the article. Here's one. So the Dutch water. Okay. Access. I can download it right here. Okay. Public Management Review. Yes, we purchased that one. It's been cited 78 times. When was it published? 2020. So now you're starting to see relationships by who's citing this original article. That may lead you to something. This vendor doesn't do it, but I'll show you in a minute how a vendor who you took this article, these people took these articles when they looked at that article. So relationship articles, which may or may not help, but I quite often find really good stuff right there. You're discovering information. Say you want to know if this author's written anything else. You can always search them by just clicking on them. Oh, they've written 3 things. All on Dutch water. Of course. That's what they do. Okay? Does public administration abstracts make a little bit more sense how you can manipulate it? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Let me go get there. Yeah, once you open up a screen, it opens up on top of it. So you got to use your back arrow to get back to it, which I just did. So back to the databases. I'm going to show you the ABI inform. That's probably the next one you will probably use. Dismiss, that's one. Okay. It looks different, different vendor, ProQuest. So if I do, oh, this is what I would need to show you. Well, that's not what I want. Got to watch this. Okay. I don't want this in the business area. On the first screen of ABI Inform, you can change the classification codes to organizational type and say you only want public sector. Or maybe you want nonprofit, but for this one, I want public sector. I'm going to add it to my search. It's going to take out a lot more of the business stuff. I still have 6,100 things. So now I can get scholarly journals. I can get dissertations, newspapers, magazines, trade journals, working papers, reports, wire feeds, other sources, conference proceedings. So let's say we want the trade journals.
What is a working paper?
A working paper would be something that they're getting ready to present at a conference. It hasn't officially been, or an organization's doing research on something like a think tank. It's a paper that's not really,
It's been actively worked on.
yes,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
it's kind of preliminary results, it tends to be. It may end up as an article, it may end up as a report on the web, it may end up something later, but this, or it may end up at a conference. It's a working paper. Does that make sense? Yes. Um, so now I've got down to 2000. I'm going to do, I have nothing more current than 2017. Okay. Yeah, this topic has really died off, hasn't it? Um, but let me make sure I've got the right subjects. That will help me here. I really want, there we are. Drinking water, there's only 21 left. Yeah. Remember when we started out with 6,000? Now we're down to 21. Better than a Google search, isn't it? Okay. Realize these are trade publications. They will not have a DOI because they're not scholarly. So no DOI. Again, most of it's full text. It may be only HTML because this database is older than blazes. You can cite it, and that's where there's a problem. You got to pick the 7th. And on top of that, when they put it in the address, which it's not, it shouldn't have an address, they send it in, they give you all our coding for the firewall. You don't put that in your references, okay? So that you don't want your references to have coding that says the name of the vendor inside the, you don't want that, okay? Just telling you. We're going to talk about that more in a minute, but okay. Say I like it. I've got stuff. It'll help me maybe define. Maybe I want to do my subject heading of lead contact in drinking water. I can do another search. These are articles that came out in newspapers, health journals. They kind of relate to this one because Flint, Michigan was the best example. So that's how this one works. It works dramatically different than public administration abstracts because it does different things. So if I take off my trade journals and my dates, and I'm filtering only to water, I can now get a scholarly article, or I can get one working paper still out there. Other sources don't ask you what that is. I never know. Depends on what they found. So say I want to do scholarly. Okay, this is an interfaces supplement to the achievement. Istanbul, it's very international. So this is where it does location. I don't want top 10 subjects. What did I click on? I got to move something to get to it. Okay. I wanted subject locations. I don't know that California's had anything, but maybe we want the US. I don't want to worry about rest of the world. Arizona, AWA, American Water Works Association, things like that. So now that would make sense. They're out Denver. They would definitely have stuff about how it is. Okay. Play with these filters on the left of all these databases. It really makes a difference over finding things. Questions about searching the two big ones. Politics database looks like ABI Inform. It's the same vendor. I will talk, if you get to a database and you don't know what it does, we have little eyes, information, tell you what they do. Soc Index is very good if you deal with anything that deals with people. Parks, elderly, services, very good in that area. And then I mentioned the annual reviews as a type to find out where a discipline or topic is going. That's there. Questions? Stop sharing. Okay. I don't know if you noticed, some of the little databases had a little robot after the link, the lock. They have AI. They have a bot. So bots are everywhere. Um, Let me go back and share and go back to my PowerPoint. Nope, that isn't the PowerPoint. Sorry. That's the actual guide. There it is. So you now know this screen because I showed it to you. Okay. Any last minute questions? Because I'm going to give you a little assignment here in a minute to see if you can handle this. Okay. Let's go over the basics of APA because it's back to, I showed you how all the databases allow you to download the citation. You can download them and put them in EndNote, Mendeley, Zotero. Both Mendeley and Zotero are attached to web browsers. I think Zotero is, Firefox. I don't know which one Mendeley. EndNote is more of a software, but we have it. We also have citing guides, and that's on that tab on that homepage of the research guide for PPA. At the bottom, it talks about the citing guides that we have. We have more specific, but I think I gave you the best stuff in that box. One of the worst questions a library can get is, I was working on this research paper and I read some stuff and I didn't keep this one article that I found. I think it was in this journal. I might have been in that database. I'm not sure. Going back and finding that needle in a haystack, guys, is so hard. So hard. I don't know if you noticed, all the databases allow you to email you. You can box the click and email a bunch of citations to yourself so you have it in case you need to go back when you're doing your research. And I've even done it to myself. I know I saw that. I can't remember where I saw it. I saw that. Yeah, I've even done it to myself. It's horrible. Okay? Just giving you a heads up for research trick. APA uses last name of author, initial, if they have a middle initial, and last name of author, initial. They allow up to 40 authors, the most of anybody. The reason being of the health sciences or health studies, they quite often, anybody who did any of the data analysis are usually an author, so it can get very intense. Then in the year, then the title of the article. Note right away that the first word is capitalized and the rest of them are not. That's a place that you're going to have to do editing. Proper names are capitalized and the first word. The name of the periodical is up in lowercase. It's italicized, comma, volume number, which is italicized. Then you got issue number in parentheses. It's not. Comma, first page dash last page. You notice how I mentioned that book chapter did not have first page, last page. You need it. ABI Inform, because it was developed in the 70s, quite often say page 16, 13 pages. So you got to figure out what the last page is because they may or may not list it. Um, Also, articles tend not to maybe go chronological. ABI Inform is a good example. The trade professional journals starts page 16 through 18, and then it jumps to finish on page 26. So it's 16-18, comma, 26. You need to include all those pages. If it's a scholarly peer-reviewed book, book chapter, article, then it has to have a DOI, and you'll maybe have to find it. If you have a chapter in a book, its author, copyright year, title of the chapter of the book, up one word capitalized, the rest lowercase, in. Now, this is the editor's, their first name, last name, not last name, first initials. It reverses. And then you have to say it's editors. You can have quite a few. Title of the book, again, up lowercase. Then if there's a volume, that's why I was looking for that volume for that one book, because you kind of need the volume. And then it does the PPs for pages. The publisher, you no longer for APA have to put in that stupid city because publishers move all the time. Then if it's got a DOI or a URL, sometimes books may have a web address. If it's an think tank or a government agency, it's the name, the year, the title of the report, the agency in charge of the report, and then the link. Real basic stuff. But a DOI should look like this, the top one. https://doi.org/. Then this one's all numbers, but some of them are alphanumeric. I won't tell you, they've got some really wild things. Scholarly publishers, Sage being a good example. When APA created the DOIs, they went back in time and added a DOI to all their articles all the way back to the beginning. And DOIs only came around in 2015. So sometimes when you're looking in a database, it may not mention a DOI. But if you go look at the article in a publisher, it may give the DOI. Or I'm going to show you a place in one search to find it to see if it will give you the DOI. The indexes may not catch up with those DOIs over time. They may not backtrack and get those. I'm pretty sure Public Administration Abstracts does not. So what you get quite often is, oh, you come in through OCLC. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. That's our firewall. Okay. So you want to take anything that says retrieve from or has an HTTP. It doesn't even have an S, so it isn't a secure one. Okay. Okay. You don't want one that looks like that. It has a vendor's name in it, basically. I think let's test you. I'm going to put the chat. I'm going to open up my chat here, see if I can see the chat. At least I think I can. Where'd you guys go with my chat? Can't find my chat. Stop sharing a minute so I can get the chat up. Show my chat. Show chat. Okay. Let me go back and share. Ah, now I got the chat up. What are you guys seeing? My screen's jumping all over the place. Okay. Now let's open the chat. Okay. If you're looking at the first citation, which is a real citation from Public Administration Abstracts, I lost the screen that I was looking at. I've got things on top of things. There we go. What is wrong with it? The DOI for this one is not weird. It's actually correct. But that's what some of them look like. Remember, if it has this but doesn't have the vendor's name, then we're good. What other things do we need to be concerned about?
The title?
The article title is all in uppercase, and that's a no-no. So federal will be uppercase. Strategies induced resistance states participation should all be lowercase. ACA Health Exchange is an official name of something, so that is continuing in full case. Yep. What about the second one, the one from ABI Inform, other than the question marks in instead of quotation marks or commas or whatever? DOI is correct. Remember, this is not a scholarly publication. Employer Benefit Advisor Online is a newsletter. So it's not got a DOI. Not in any way, shape, or face, not forever. Actually, the casing is pretty good, except Obamacare should be capitalized because it is an official name. But it's not bad. But it's not uncommon for them to throw you a DOI that doesn't exist in ABI Inform. What about the politics database? What's wrong with that one? Anybody? No DOI. Yes, the title casing. It shouldn't be all caps and shouting at you. The word all isn't capitalized, not LL, just the A, nothing else. The reason why there's no DOI here, planning is a trade professional journal by the American Planning Association. Trade professional journals do not have DOIs. They're not scholarly. Are you starting to see the difference when I talk about different kinds of articles? There's a reason why we need to distinguish them because depends on whether they have a DOI or not. Depends on where you find them, that kind of thing. Does it make a little bit better sense?
It does. I just need to see it more often. It's been 4 years since I've seen bibliography.
Yep. Let's see my next. Before I do that, let me show you a trick. Let me see what I've got open here that I can. So say somebody comes to me, I've got this article and I don't know, I know it's a scholarly article because I limited to scholarly peer reviewed. Okay. So, let's go here. And from here, I'm going to go to the library webpage. This is where OneSearch really plays a lot. I go in and I put quotes around that title of that article they gave me. And it tells me, techniques, this one, that it's in this journal. And no, they don't have the DOI for this one. But if I go to the article itself, 1992, I think Wiley did DOIs. Wiley's one of those people that should have. They sure did. So I have to come clear over. Oh, look at, they got the DOI. Da, 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 da. No. You have to fix it on their own page. Okay? Because it's linked to us. That's why it's a problem. Sometimes you have to go back to get the DOI. Our OneSearch is trying very hard to put it in the record if they can get it. So is this one newer? 1991, 92. See, they're old enough that, yeah. Remember, pre-2015, the publisher went and put them in, but it's after the fact. So it's harder to you have to literally go back to the original article to find it. But that's a great thing for OneSearch to help you do. Okay? Or if you want to find that article again, you know it was about that, but you can't remember You maybe think you know the journal name. You can kind of search it here and see if you can find it again. Okay. Having done that, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to do a little testing. We're going to see if you can do this. So you all need to open up your research guide for public policy and administration. Click on the Get Sources. And I am going to give you guys a question. And we're going to talk our way through it. A little research. Where are you guys? Right here. Okay. So you're looking at this topic. What would be the key words that you would want to type in to get information? If you want to open up your mics, go ahead. Or you can type it in chat. Go ahead.
Which words would I try to type in?
Yeah.
The in,
Recreational
yeah,
space.
in creation of space and maybe in
Okay.
children,
Yep.
California.
Okay. Commas do not work in the databases. They may work on Google, but they do not work in the databases. You got to either leave a space or put the word and in there. Correct. Yeah, very good. Recreational space, you'd find all the words on recreational and all the things that talk about space, which might be places to, I don't know. I would put that one in quotation marks. Okay. So probably what I kind of like this recreation and California, although I probably, and well, ho, 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 youth or children or kids. Remember, computer's not smart enough to know all those acronym, all those words. Okay, so this is Boolean logic. Recreation has to have either youth, has to have either children, or has to have kids in them. So it's going to gather up all those words and make sure recreation is against it. The word space too ambiguous. I don't know what you're asking me. I'm sorry, Andy.
Like, well, if I put space, will it think I'm talking about like, just the galaxies and all that jazz?
That is a good question because public administration is one of those words. Public policy is one of those words. Environmental policy is one of those words. You need more than one word when you have those big topics. Okay. So, based on what we're going to ask next, I think we may have to think a little bit more. That's why I didn't do space, because once I get in the database and I filter it, I might find things about space, or I might at that point see there's not a whole lot to find with recreation and kids that I might then go back, or they might be too much recreation and kids, and I might do recreational space and kids. Kind of based on your results, that may make a difference. But yeah, sometimes the ASCRIT is to, so if you have a word like, do not do this. I will get intern, I will get international, I will get, I can't tell you how many words you get because any letter that's after the end is added to searched. It works better when you've got something like policies, which is an IES maybe. You get policies. Yep. It's one of those things that it adds the letters after that last letter you put on there. So intern is not a good one to use because you know how many words continue after that one. Just look in the dictionary. It's pages and pages. But say I want international. No, I just type in the words. I don't even go with that one. I don't use it as much as I used to because the databases do look at rather plurals for you. Okay. Okay. Looking at the sources, which database would I start? Would you recommend I start in on how to answer this question? Step to the public administration ones. You got 5 choices.
Um, maybe the public administration aspect.
It probably wouldn't, it's got humans in it.
The Soch index?
Social Index is a good choice. I probably actually start with a trade or professional journal, which would put me in where? ABI Inform. Let's talk the distinction. Public administration abstracts really is on the theoretical parts of public administration. If you're in public administration and you're a city manager or you're dealing with topics like this, your trade professional journals and ABI or your Soch Index work better. Does that make a little bit more sense? So let's go play. Let's go see. I'm going to copy this guy. And I'm going to share you, share. I need my databases. If you by chance end up here by accident, you can always do subjects here too. Go public administration down here and filter, search, and guess what comes back up? Those guys that I gave you already. I don't even know if you got to see them before. Okay. So if I did this in public administration, this topic, let's see if anything comes up. I got 11. Through time and this is parent-child relationships. Not quite. Australia, child welfare. No, not quite. Leisure services, park usage. Ooh, parks and recreation commissions. Okay, this might be a possibility. It's 1984. Ring the bell for recess. This is on schools. Environmental household overweight Filipino teenagers. No. Development. No. Social services. No. Leisure study. What year is this one? 1978. No. 77. No. 81. No. Okay. Nope. Not where we want to be. Okay. Let's go back and let's go into ABI Inform. I got an internal error. What do I got going on? Why didn't you work? There it is. Because it wanted me to go back to where I was. Okay. Okay. I put my topic in there. I got 458,000 hits. No, 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 no. One, I don't want back to 1855. I'm going to update. I only got 100. And we're going to, because we got some money, we can do the last few years. Yay. Okay. I'm down to 96,000. I then want to maybe look at location. Remember, we talked about California being important. So there's California. I still have 1,400 in California. Let's see if we get down to city. Sometimes there's New York. If you're doing Long Beach, I'm sorry to say you have to do Los Angeles. We're stuck with them. There's Los Angeles. Yay. That's enough for me. I'm down 1,700. Now let's do the subjects because I'm seeing stuff on tobacco. That's not really what I want. I definitely want parks and recreation. You can do it graphically or you can do it by words. Well, to get what I want, I have to do the more. I want to do parks and recreation. I'm down to 313 articles since 2020 that deal with recreation. Now, some of them, it's doing a lot of social media stuff. Maybe I want only the trades. I don't want newswire feeds. So here's one where San Diego Business Journal talks about a water park. I don't know why this Japan one's in there. This is a book review. Idaho business booming, tracking steps, Orange County designing designation parks. That might give me an idea, a book reference, how Alaska's doing it. So you start to see, even within this, because articles get me, oh, there's Costa Mesa, California. They aren't very good. You kind of have to play with them. But I would think this might give you something to look at, like this one that talked about designing designation parks. It talks about how they got a landscaper, all this kind of thing. Here's other things that might help me. These probably don't have as many authors, but they give you suggested other sources that might help. Does that make sense? So I'm going to cite it in APA, not MLA, AMA. Okay. What would I have to do to correct it, guys? I can't see chat, so you may have to shout out at me. Say that again. The address. It doesn't shouldn't have an HTTP. You're right.
The title, I think.
Yep. Designation park should be lowercase.
And the DOI?
DOI, correct. Because there are HTTP. It isn't even a DOI. It's an HTTP. No good. It does need a space between the 18. It should be 18 comma 20 because it doesn't go from page 18 to 18, but it thinks it does. No, so it'd be 18 comma 20 because it's not. That's just something. There should be a space between the comma and the 20. So I took it and I'm going to fix it. Does that make a little bit more sense of how this works? Now, do you have questions? Now I'm expecting lots of questions.
I don't have a
Oh,
question. Sorry.
go
I
ahead.
just have like a comment. Like I've been in the comm department for 6 years now, and I never knew that like I'm not supposed to have the like I'm not supposed to have like the CSUOB version of the link. I've been like turning in so many articles with that link. I didn't know
I
that.
wonder, well, wonder if your professor looked at your citations. If it was a part of your grade, not a problem. I do know some faculty are very fussy about it, but if the person's looking for it, it means absolutely nothing to them. Okay, a citation be something that someone who looks at your paper can then find that information. And I'll tell you, my research, I can't tell you my citations. I'm looking at it, cannot find it, cannot figure out what they cited. It makes no sense. And that's pre AI, just bad citations. I saw someone else wanted to say something. Was that
It
you?
it
Yeah.
seems to me that it would be very difficult to answer this question with the amount of research or articles and trade journals that we saw based on the database search. Is it expected to be kind of a laborious process to find the sources and citations?
This is where you're not liking what you're seeing. Click on that Ask a Librarian
Okay.
because we have recreation databases that would answer this question. And they're not key to what you would do. I have 2 recreation databases that cover this topic very well.
Okay. So we're just seeing like a sliver, sort of.
Like I said, you've got 5 databases in public administration of 330.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I showed you, let me show the screen again real quick. Oops. Let me close this. Got to move some things around here a minute. Sorry. When we were in, oh, do I even have it? You see what I'm seeing? Hold on, I'm looking. When I pulled up from the database list, not the research guide, we have the core that you will see on the research guide, but then there's other ones we recommend. I don't even have recreation on here because truthfully, I don't know that you guys are studying parks. That's the recreation people. um, but I do know, interestingly, I was a mentor for this group, and she is now for the city of Hunting Beach, the recreation manager. So she's a PPA with recreation background, and she's taking care of the parks and recreation and libraries and stuff. And she's just won, but she's going to be announced as winner of one of the top 40 under 45 CSULB grads, age 45, taking on a big thing. So that's kind of important to me. So let me clear filters. 312, we're dropped a couple databases. So sometimes just looking in the subjects, like you quickly find out that, oh, why wasn't I looking in the recreation area for this topic? And there's the ABI Inform, Hospitality Tourism, Social Index again, Educate Eric Woodwork, Sports Discus, which is more sporty sport. So sometimes that's why I told you about the PPA topics. They're outside the norm. So I'd set something up for you. Click on that Ask a Librarian. They know to kind of manipulate the databases and kind of what they do. There are, depends on what you need. Like that article from the one city, Anaheim, Disneyland, a park for non-Disneyland people. If you're in the public, if you're working for a city and that's they're kind of looking at, that might be something they want to model their structure. I mean, that might be a way for them to model what they want to do. It's not a research article, how we got there. We saw the lead. There were research articles, how they're dealing with it. So it kind of also depends on what you need and where you are in the process. So that's why I talked about different types of information. Depending on where you are in the process, depends on what you need. So is it easy? For me, it's really easy, but that's beside the point. For you, not so much. Frustrates people to death. We have 24/7 librarians. We have a reference desk that's open 6 days a week. We have the librarians on duty till 7 o'clock tonight. We open at 10 to 7 Monday through Thursday. We're open. We have someone in the building helping from 10 to 4 on Friday, and then somebody helping from, oh, I got to look our hours up, on Saturday. We're not open on Sunday. Home. Saturday, the building's open 10 to 4. The reference desk is open. Oh, we're not open on the reference desk's not open Saturday. It's not open on Sunday from 2 to 5. I haven't done reference on, we don't do that many weekends. We share it. So, but yeah. And that's someone who can sit down. I gave you on that lib guide in the lower left-hand corner is send me an email. Okay. I have no problem by email, but I expect this information. I want to know what you're looking for, where you have looked, what words you used, or maybe what words you used and where you looked. And I can quite often tell, oh, we've got something special over here that would work better for you. Okay. Or if you're finding stuff, but you're not happy with it, let me know that too, so we can rethink your strategy or your vocabulary or your database. I mean, I couldn't find the articles on theology and painted ponies. And I asked my colleagues, and a couple of them came up with the 2 articles right away because their specialty somewhere else, and that's where it really was, not where I was looking. Okay. Other questions, other concerns? Okay, Dr. Powell, I have entertained them enough, made their brains fuzzy, make them want to
Thank you.
become librarians when they grow
Thank
up.
you so much. This was so helpful. I've never had like a in-depth breakdown of our resource of our library resources. Oh, this was super
Good.
helpful.
Use them. You pay a lot for them. Oh, and on that database list, you can limit to streaming media. We have contemporary movies that you can watch. We paid for them. You paid for them. Use them because we're getting not using them enough, and we may have to cancel that. Ouch. Swank being the most popular one. That's just not a canopy. Yeah, just mentioning that.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Kelly. We truly appreciate it. You're always so generous with your time to
Oh,
come and
thank
do
you.
this for us. And outstanding information. I always tell all my courses that this is probably the most useful presentation you'll have in your entire time in the NPA program. So again, thank you, Kelly. Hope you feel better very soon. And thanks for
Thank
being so
you.
generous. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break. We've been going for a while now, so let's take about a 10-minute break. Come on back then at 5:57, I guess it would be. Take about 10 minutes. Come on back, and then we'll talk American government and for the remainder of our night tonight. So I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Okay, I think our 10 minutes are up, so let's reconvene. Before we get into our discussion of American government, though, just one quick reminder. If you do not want to participate in the Day One Digital Access Program, you want to get the textbooks on your own. The last day to opt out of the program is February 2nd. I know it used to say February 3rd. I think they figured out that was a Tuesday instead of the Monday, and so you should be getting updates on your Canvas site when you log in telling you the opt-out date is actually February the 2nd by 11:59 p.m. So let's keep that in mind if you do want to opt out of the Day One Digital Access Program. So, what we're going to talk about through the rest of the remaining time tonight, the basics of American government. And I presented to you in our last class why we do this here in 500 to kind of put everyone on an equal footing with their understanding of American government, the institutions of American government, because what we do as public administrators occurs within public organizations. Public organizations typically exist within American government because they are, by definition, governmental institutions. So it's important for us to all have the same working knowledge of the institutions and the processes and practices of American government. Now, we certainly will not be able to get through all this information tonight, so we're going to get through all the information that we can. Then the remaining information on American government will then finish up next week at the beginning of class. So I think we all have a good working understanding of the basic pillars of our system of American government. Our system of government is really very much predicated on this idea of the limitation of governmental power. So we limit governmental power in a couple of different ways. One way we do it, as we all know, is horizontally through separation of powers, through these checks and balances. So we have a legislature, we have an executive branch, and we have a judicial branch. Now, the balance of power between these three different branches really is very dynamic in nature and changes from one era to the next. There have been periods of time where Congress has dominated the president. We've seen some very strong speakers of the House. So people like Henry Clay in the early 1800s, people like Thomas Brackett Reed in the late 1800s, people like Joe Cannon in the early 1900s. Some will argue people like Tip O'Neill and Newt Gingrich. Those were speakers who really worked very hard to make sure that Congress was the first branch of government. A lot of political scientists will make that argument that Congress is truly the first branch of government because Congress is the first branch that's mentioned in the Constitution. Article 1 is all about the Congress. Article 1 is also the lengthiest and the most detailed article in the entire Constitution. At other points in time in our history, we have seen presidents that have dominated Congress. We are living in a current era of what's called the unitary executive theory. And unitary executive theory postulates that the power should reside with the president as opposed to Congress because the president is the only nationally elected figure. So there's only one position that's elected nationally, and that is the president. Now, that unitary executive theory is something that is really we're seeing in the current Trump administration. It's something that is not new, and it dates back all the way to the 1820s and the 1830s with Andrew Jackson. So we're seeing today the president dominate Congress. And the president has been able to dominate Congress because Congress has ceded a lot of its power and responsibility to the president. So one example of that is appropriations. So when we read Article 1, Section 8, we know that Congress basically has the power of the purse strings, that Congress has the ability to lay and collect taxation. We know that Congress also has the appropriation power, and there's an appropriations clause in the Constitution that says that before money can be removed from the federal treasury, that money must first be appropriated. Appropriation is essentially just saying this is how the money is being spent. This is what the money will be spent on. So Congress has the power of appropriation. However, we have seen the president, the current president, do a lot of what we call rescissions. So the president, even though this appropriation bill has been signed into law, the president at a later date will then say, well, I'm just not going to spend that money. I don't agree with this policy, and so therefore I'm going to refuse to spend the money, and I want to spend the money elsewhere. Well, whenever the president rescinds funds, technically, under a 1974 piece of legislation, the president needs to put together a rescissions package, which is a list of all these appropriations that the president is refusing to spend, and then send that rescissions package to Congress for congressional approval. Back in July, when the president did these rescissions, he sent a rescissions package over to Congress, and Congress approved that rescissions package. The most recent round of rescissions, the president did not send a rescissions package over to Congress. He just merely said, I'm refusing to spend that money. Congress did not request a rescissions package, and Congress did not push back on those rescissions. So usually when presidents dominate Congress, they do so because Congress is a willing partner in being dominated by the president. Likewise, with the judiciary, we have had some Supreme Courts that have tried to dominate the other two branches of government. A very famous case that you probably heard about in an undergraduate history course, Marbury versus Madison. And we won't go into all the details of Marbury versus Madison, but back in 1803, Chief Justice Marshall came up with this idea of judicial review and established the fact that the judiciary has the ability to review the actions of Congress and the president for constitutionality. That was really our first instance of the Supreme Court really standing up and saying we have the ability constitutionally to review the actions of the other two branches of government. Subsequent to that, we have seen some Supreme Court justices, especially chief justices, who have pushed back very hard on the other two branches of government. We had throughout the 1960s a whole litany of cases where the Supreme Court pushed back on presidential power. One classic example dates back to the New Deal. And in 1933, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came into office, he started to initiate all of his New Deal programs to help pull the country out of the throes of the Great Depression. Well, a lot of those programs were questioned as being going beyond presidential power and being unconstitutional. So when those cases went to the Supreme Court, the first few of those cases, the Supreme Court actually ruled against the president and said, yes, the president is overstepping his boundaries with these New Deal programs. So what FDR did is he then did what was called a court packing threat, where he threatened the Supreme Court and he said, if you don't start approving my New Deal programs, I am going to pack the court. I'm going to increase the size of the court from 9 to 15 justices, and that will then give me 6 additional justices I can appoint to the court. That will then give me a friendly majority. Now, we don't have a lot of empirical evidence to prove that that court packing threat was effective at getting the court to start approving these New Deal programs as being constitutional, but they did. And so after this court packing threat, the Supreme Court kind of fell in line and started supporting these presidential initiatives as being constitutional. But again, this little, brief little history lesson just kind of underscores the fact that the balance of power really does shift over time. So that is our horizontal limitation of power, balancing what Alexander Hamilton referred to as ambition against ambition. And that was the entire purpose of having these 3 different branches of government. So that's your horizontal limitation. Then we have a vertical limitation of power in our system of American federalism. So the Constitution establishes a national government and state governments. Those are the only 2 levels of government that are established within the original Constitution. Local governments are not mentioned in the Constitution. And once we start including local governments in the conversation, we kind of transition from constitutional federalism to what we now know as intergovernmental relations. As you move throughout the MPA program, if you are interested in taking the elective course on intergovernmental relations, you'll notice that it's called intergovernmental relations. I am old enough that when I was in my graduate program, that course was referred to as federalism. But today, those federalism courses have become intergovernmental relations because of the pronounced role of local governments in this vertical relationship between different levels. So we separate power horizontally and vertically for the purpose of limiting the power of government. Our type of government we oftentimes like to refer to as a democracy. However, I think the way in which our government works, there are some limitations to just how much of a democracy we really are. So my first question to you tonight is, when I say the word democracy, what makes a government a democracy? What types of words do you associate with the word democracy?
Uh, I personally think of representation
Yep.
when I hear democracy.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. People get to participate. People get to select people to represent them. They get to actually make decisions at the ballot box. Democracy says that power comes from the people, and the people then actively participate in making decisions. That's a democracy. And we have some vestiges of a democracy in our system of government. But I would actually argue that the amount of democracy that we are afforded as citizens really depends upon where we live and what state we live in. Some states have some elements of direct democracy. Here in California, we have a lot of elements of direct democracy. Here in California, we have things such as initiatives. And I'm going to type in text chat and talk at the same time, so please forgive my misspellings as I try and multitask doing that. But we have initiatives here in California. An initiative allows voters to circulate a petition. And if they get enough signatures on that petition, they can then force an issue onto the ballot for people to vote directly on. Now, in order to get a issue on the ballot through the initiative process, you typically have to circulate petitions and get enough valid signatures to be equal to 8% of the number of people who voted in the last gubernatorial election. So that's the standard here in the state of California. We're not the only state that has an initiative process that allows people to put issues directly on the ballot and vote directly on issues. Other states have initiatives as well. But a lot of those other states that have initiatives, they will have a different threshold for the number of signatures to allow you to put an issue on the ballot. In some states, it's 10% or 15% or 20%. In some states, it's a percentage of the number of people who voted in the last presidential election. So every state has a different approach. Some states do not have an initiative process. And so I would argue if you live in a state that has an initiative process, you have more of an element of direct democracy because you get to vote directly on making these decisions at the ballot box. In addition to initiatives, we also have a referendum process as well. So people can vote directly on issues through a referendum. The way in which a referendum typically works, and there are different types of referenda that we're not going to get into in this class, but the way in which a referendum typically works is that it allows people to vote directly, oftentimes on a law that's already been passed by the state legislature. So the state legislature passes a law. People are not happy about that law. They can then circulate petitions. If they get at least the number of signatures equal to 5%, so it's a lower standard, 5% of the number of people who voted in the last gubernatorial election, then they can put that law on the ballot for people to vote directly on. So it kind of serves as a check on what our elected representatives are doing in Sacramento. Again, not every state has a referendum process, but those states that have both initiatives as well as referenda, those are the states that tend to have more of a direct democracy in terms of the way in which they make their decisions. So we don't talk a lot about it. When we talk about American government, we usually like to say we are a democracy, but there are gradations to a democracy, and the amount of democracy you enjoy really depends upon the state in which you live. But in addition to having these direct democratic elements, we also are a republic. And you've probably heard that quote from Benjamin Franklin when he was leaving the Constitutional Convention. Someone asked him, "What type of government do we have?" And Benjamin Franklin said, "We have a republic if we can keep it." A republic is where we elect our representatives to go and make decisions for us. So instead of every individual voter making a decision, they elect representatives to go to Washington, D.C., Sacramento, Long Beach to make those decisions for their constituents. So I think if you really want to characterize the type of government we have, I think you would call us a constitutional republic. Or another phrase you can use is a democratic republic, because we do have elements of direct democracy, but we are a republic whereby we elect representatives to go and make decisions for us. So either a constitutional republic or a democratic republic. Now, since we are a constitutional republic, our form of a republic is spelled out in our Constitution. And the Constitution is the social contract. And if you've had undergraduate political science courses, you have probably been exposed to some British political philosophers, people like Thomas Hobbes, people like John Locke, a Swiss philosopher like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Thomas Thomas Hobbes really believed that in his book, in his work Leviathan, that government should have the power. The power should reside in this Leviathan, this government. And then government decides what freedoms belong to people. John Locke, in his second treatise on government, argued the opposite. And John Locke argued that power begins with the people. And then people enter into a contract with their government whereby people give up certain rights and certain freedoms to the government. And then elected officials in the government then promise to use those powers judiciously to provide for the welfare of society. So just like with any other contract, a constitution is an agreement between the people and their government. So our Constitution is a social contract. A lot of the framers of the Constitution were very big fans of John Locke. Thomas Jefferson was such a big fan of John Locke that he actually borrowed language from John Locke and used that language directly. So John Locke talked about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Thomas Jefferson took that phrase and transformed it to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so it's very clear that Jefferson, Madison, and others were very big believers in this idea of a social contract theory, first put forth, or at least contemporaneously put forth by John Locke. So, John Locke's social contract theory really does color our Constitution and gives us our theoretical and philosophical basis for this contract between people and their government. There was an interesting discussion that occurred among some of the framers about what happens if government violates this contract. So today, if you have a contract with someone else and the other person violates the contract, that's tort law. You can then take your case to the courts. Well, what happens if government violates this constitution, this contract? Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a Swiss political philosopher whose writings really gave the framework and the underpinnings for the French Revolution, Rousseau argued that if the government violates the contract, then it is not only the right of the people, but it is incumbent upon the people to remove that government and replace that government with a new government that would abide by this contract. Thomas Jefferson, as a very big believer in Rousseau, parroted a lot of that same idea. And so Jefferson made the, with all pun intended, revolutionary argument that if government violates the contract, the people have the right and the obligation to overthrow that government and replace that government with one that will abide by the contract. So the framers took social contract theory very, very seriously and took the contract that we have, the Constitution, very seriously as well. So the Constitution is our contract. We have had two contracts, two constitutions at the national level in our history. The first constitution was the Articles of Confederation, and I provided you a link on our Canvas site to go and take a cursory look at the Articles of Confederation. When you read through the articles, you probably noticed that there are some fundamental flaws that were witnessed in the articles that really gave rise to replacing the articles with our current Constitution. In the articles refer to this union, this confederation of the states, as being a quote unquote firm league of friendship. Now, a firm league of friendship sounds good, but it's not the same thing as being a united nation. So these states are joining together into this league of friendship to support each other, but it's not the same thing as them being part of a federation. It was truly a confederation made up of individual states that retained their sovereignty. So you had all these individual sovereign states coming together in these Articles of Confederation to support each other. Another important part of the articles, that I don't know if you picked up on or not, was the use of the term United States of America. Now, today we talk about the United States of America all the time as very much of a proper noun. United States of America was used one time as a proper noun, capitalized United, capitalized state, capitalized America, one time. And the time in which it was used as a proper noun was in the passage in the articles that said, the style of this confederation shall be the United States of America. The word style meant title. So that's basically when they were telling us the title of this new nation will be, of this new confederation, will be the United States of America. However, throughout the remainder of the articles, whenever they refer to United States, they typically refer to it as the United States in Congress assembled. Now, that clause, in Congress assembled, is extremely important. When they used the word Congress in the Articles of Confederation, they weren't talking about the Congress that we know today, and many people hate today. When you think about the U.S. Congress, we think about a permanent structure. We think about a brick and mortar, Capitol Hill and the House and the Senate, with permanency as this entity. When they talked about Congress in the articles, they were using the term Congress synonymous to being a meeting. So a Congress is a meeting. So tonight we are having a Congress of PPA 500. So essentially what they were saying in the articles is that we are United States when the states are together in this meeting, in this Congress. which then begs the question, well, how united are we when we're not meeting in this Congress? In the intervening time between when we are meeting, are we truly a united nation? And that's a very valid question. A couple of other problems with the Articles of Confederation. We didn't have really an independent executive. The president would come out of Congress, out of this meeting of the states. So we didn't have an independent executive. We didn't have an independent judiciary. We also, if we needed to protect ourselves against foreign invasion, that protection would come from state militias. So states would maintain their own individual militias that were independent of each other, and those state militias would then provide us with our national defense. Also, if we notice problems in the article, the only way to amend the Articles of Confederation was through a unanimous vote of all 13 states. Well, you can imagine how difficult it would be to get a unanimous vote of all 13 states in order to amend the articles. So even if you witness flaws in the articles, it was next to impossible to rectify those flaws. But the major issue with the articles that became a very prominent issue relatively quickly, especially in 1786 and 1787, was the lack of national defense. And in your history classes, you probably have heard about Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion was the primary triggering event that led the framers to call for a constitutional convention and eventually replace the articles with a brand new constitution. Now, Shays' Rebellion is sometimes presented in a little bit too much of a simplified fashion in history classes. It wasn't just one rebellion, it was a series of rebellions. Shays' Rebellion was the most notable one because it was one of the largest and it was led by a retired Army captain. So you actually had a retired military officer leading it, which then gave it its level of prominence. But in these rebellions, you had small farmers who were losing their farms. They were having their farms foreclosed upon by banks. So what they would do is they would then rebel. They would then march on the banks to try and shut the banks down to keep the banks from foreclosing on their farms. Well, in Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts, it took the state militia a lot of work and some time to put down this rebellion of all these farmers being led by a retired Army captain. That served as a triggering event to make people wonder, well, if we have so much trouble putting down a rebellion of farmers, what are we going to do if we have a foreign invasion or another foreign invasion? So it really kind of raised the intent on a lot of people that we need to amend the articles in order to create a stronger national defense. And that was the impetus then for the Constitutional Convention. So the Constitutional Convention was organized for the purpose of amending the Articles of Confederation. Because again, you had to have all 13 states to do it. So you get them all together into this convention, and that's how you can then offer up these amendments. Well, as we know, the Constitutional Convention became a runaway convention relatively quickly. And instead of amending the articles, the delegate to the convention ended up coming up with a new constitution as a replacement. One of the reasons why they came up with a new constitution instead of amending the articles was the work primarily of Federalists such as James Madison. So when you think about when the Constitutional Convention occurred, it was difficult to get there. The roads sometimes were impassable. They were dirt roads that very quickly became mud roads. And so we had delegates kind of trickling in little by little. The delegates who arrived at the convention first were the Federalists. They were people like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, people who believed in a stronger national government. They wanted to get rid of the Articles and replace the Articles with a brand new constitution. Finally, when the Anti-Federalists got there to the convention, Madison and his compatriots, the Federalists, were able to have already had the ball rolling toward getting rid of the Articles and coming up with a brand new constitution. And Madison used a very effective type of rhetoric in that the Anti-Federalists were there admitting that they wanted stronger national defense. So let's amend the articles just to create stronger national defense. However, Madison realized that all of these delegates were white male property owners. And as white male property owners, they were the creditors in society. They were the ones who had loaned money to make the revolution possible. So whenever creditors loan money, what do they want? They want to get their debts repaid. And so that was a nerve that Madison was able to press with these delegates that you don't just want stronger national defense, you want a stronger national government that can better regulate the economy so that you can get your debts repaid. Once he was able to get the Anti-Federalists to agree that they wanted a stronger national government for more than just national defense, then it was basically a done deal. And the Constitution was then written to replace the Articles of Confederation. And the primary author of the Constitution was none other than James Madison. So at this Constitutional Convention, we end up replacing the Articles with a brand new Constitution. That Constitution is a series of compromises. And I provided you a link to the Constitution, so you probably had a chance to at least look through it. Next time, we are going to spend some time going through the Constitution because this class is really about the only opportunity you'll have in the program to really go through the Constitution and understand what the rights are that are incorporated within the Constitution. We as public administrators are expected to know and endeavor not to violate the constitutional rights of citizens we deal with. So it's important for us in maintaining our qualified good faith immunity to understand the rights that are laid out in the Constitution. So we'll spend some time next week talking about the details in the Constitution, but let's just briefly talk about how we got there and how we ended up with this new Constitution. It is a series of compromises because we had three main conflicts that were going on in the Constitutional Convention. The first one was a conflict between large versus small states, and this was obviously around representation in this new Congress that we were creating. Now, the first idea for the Congress was a unicameral Congress, so you only had one House of Congress. Large states wanted representation based upon proportional representation. Small states wanted equal representation for obvious reasons. The Virginia plan was the large state plan. The New Jersey plan was a small state plan calling for equal representation. The first major compromise we got, known as the Great Compromise, was the Connecticut Compromise. And in the Connecticut Compromise, we created a bicameral legislature, a House of Representatives based upon proportional representation, and a Senate based upon equal representation. So our bicameral legislature is the first result of these compromises. Then the second main conflict that was certainly much more difficult to deal with, and I think we make the argument that the framers did not deal with it well at all, was the conflict between slave and free states. So we know that slave states, predominantly in the South, their economy was predicated on the institution of slavery. These slave states wanted to get the institution of slavery incorporated within the new Constitution. Others, such as Hamilton and Madison, really pushed back on that. And they knew it was imperative to keep the institution out of the Constitution, because once you put the institution of slavery into the Constitution, you freeze it and you make it permanent. And we know how difficult it is to amend constitutions. We have only amended our Constitution 27 times, and 10 of those times all came at once in the Bill of Rights. So one thing we can credit the Federalists like Hamilton and Madison for is keeping the institution out of the Constitution. However, that's about all that we can credit them with. One of the major compromises that was put into the Constitution was the Three-Fifths Compromise. The Three-Fifths Compromise, which fortunately is no longer part of the Constitution, was a way in which they could ameliorate some of the concerns of southern states in terms of having representation from enslaved people. And so an enslaved person would count as 3/5 of a free person for the purposes of representation. Then the second way in which they dealt with it was a compromise that prohibited the banning of the slave trade until at least the year 1808. So those were the two compromises, obviously abhorrent compromises, but those were the two compromises that the framers put into the Constitution to try and deal with this slave versus free state type of conflict. As we all know, what that ended up doing is it ended up laying the seeds then for the Civil War that would occur 80 years later, 70 years later. So that's how they dealt with that second conflict. The third conflict at the Constitutional Convention was a conflict between the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. Federalists wanted a stronger national government in the Constitution. Anti-Federalists wanted power to remain with the state governments. So they believed in states' rights. So since you had two completely diametrically opposed positions, you had to try and figure out some compromises in the Constitution in order to deal with that conflict. One of the big wins for the Federalists was the Supremacy Clause in Article 6 of the Constitution. So in Article 6, we have the Supremacy Clause that says the Constitution, treaties, and laws of the United States are the supreme laws of the land. So if a state constitution comes into conflict with the national constitution, then the national constitution wins. So that was a big win for the Federalists. But to offset that, we also saw some wins for the Anti-Federalists. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution lays out what are called the enumerated powers of Congress. Whenever you enumerate powers, you are listing those powers. Whenever you list powers, you are by definition saying, here are the powers of Congress. Anything that is not listed, anything that is not enumerated, is a power that does not belong to Congress. So by enumerating these powers, that was a win for the Anti-Federalists. But at the end of Article 1, Section 8, we have the Elastic Clause that gives Congress the ability to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. That necessary and proper clause basically says Congress can do anything that it needs to do in order to carry out its enumerated powers. So that was more of a nod to the Federalists over the Anti-Federalists. So we had these compromises that were built in to deal with the Federalist-Anti-Federalist conflict. However, the Anti-Federalists were still not happy. And we still had Anti-Federalists who refused to sign off on the Constitution and some states that refused to ratify the Constitution. Within about a year of the Constitution coming out of the Constitutional Convention, we had the requisite number of states to ratify it for the Constitution to go into effect. So Article 7 of the Constitution tells us in order for that Constitution to go into effect, it would have to first be ratified by 9 out of 13 states. We got those 9 states relatively quickly. One of those states that did not ratify it, though, was the state of New York. So what the Federalists had to do is they had to come up with some strategies to try and convince the Anti-Federalists that this new national government would not be too strong and to get them to ratify and support the Constitution. So as you know again from your history classes, two of the major things that the framers did is they wrote the Federalist Papers. And so we had 3 of them. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay wrote 85 Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers were published in newspapers in New York to convince the legislature in New York and the Anti-Federalists in New York to ratify the Constitution. Now, the 85 Federalist Papers were written under the pseudonym of Publius. So at least initially, we didn't have identities for the people who wrote them. We figured out who wrote them pretty quickly. So Alexander Hamilton wrote 51 of the 85 Federalist Papers. James Madison wrote 29 of those papers, and John Jay wrote 5 because John Jay fell ill, could only write 5 of them. So the majority were written by Alexander Hamilton. So these Federalist Papers are written for the purpose of convincing New York to ratify the new Constitution. Now, for our purposes in this class, I have linked for you on Canvas a link to all the Federalist Papers, but you don't have to read all 85 of them. The 2 that we really focus on here in this class are Federalist Paper number 10 and Federalist Paper number 39. Federalist Paper 10, written by James Madison, is the basis for your first Canvas essay that is due next week. In that Canvas essay, what you are going to do is taking Madison's argument in Federalist number 10, you will answer the question, are we more factionalized today than we were back in Madison's time? And then what types of strategies do you think would be effective at trying to control the effects of factions? Madison was a big believer in what he called a compound republic. So the prevailing political thought at that time was that the best way and the most efficient and effective way to organize a government is through what was called by Montesquieu and others a compact republic. So we keep the republic small. It's a small jurisdiction, a small geographical area populated by people and groups who share many of the same opinions and thoughts. So that type of cohesion, that type of homogeneity would then make it easier to govern. And so that was a compact republic. Madison had the completely opposite thought process. Madison said that the best way is through what he called a compound republic. So he said in a compound republic, we have a large jurisdiction, and in that large jurisdiction, we have a lot of different ideas and different groups, and those groups can certainly come into conflict with each other, but that is the best way to protect a democracy. So when you have this compound republic, you are by definition going to have conflict between these groups, between these factions, as he referred to them. So he said there are two ways you can deal with that conflict. One way is by eliminating factions, so by eliminating different opinions. He says you can't do that because if you do that, you eliminate the very heart of a democracy. So instead, he argues what we should do is control their effects. And we control the effects of factions by balancing one faction against another. And Madison felt that we could effectively balance ambition against ambition, one faction against another, to control these factions so we don't have a tyranny that occurs within this compound republic. So that's one argument that he made to the anti-federalists who said, well, it'll just be out of control and there's no way that a national government will be able to control all these different groups. Then in Federalist number 39, which is actually my favorite Federalist paper, if anyone can have a favorite Federalist paper, it's my favorite Federalist paper. And in Federalist number 39, Madison gives us a really nice microcosm of the defense of the Constitution. Remember, all these Federalist papers were being written kind of as a sales pitch to convince New York and the Anti-Federalists to ratify the Constitution. So as part of that sales pitch, what Madison decides to do in Federalist 39 is he decides to take two different approaches. The first approach he takes to convince the Anti-Federalists is to tell them, do not be afraid of this new Constitution. This new Constitution, this new national government is very similar to what you are already familiar with in your respective states. And then he gives them some examples. He said, let's take the position of president, for example. The president will serve a 4-year term. That 4-year term is shorter than the terms that many governors will serve in your individual states. So if you're saying you're afraid a president will become too powerful, well, that president will be in office for a shorter period of time than the governors that you have put in place in your states. So let's take a look at Congress. So the House of Representatives, they only have 2-year terms, which are far shorter than the terms of representatives in your state legislatures. So you can't be afraid of that. The Senate, okay, they will have long terms, they will have 6-year terms, but you know what? A lot of your states have got representatives who serve 6, 7, 8-year terms, so a 6-year term isn't even all that long. So he kind of tries to convince them, don't be afraid of this Constitution. It's very familiar to you. It's very similar to what you already have. Then the second tack that he takes is he said, well, let's just go ahead and deconstruct the Constitution into its component parts. And the question that Madison wanted to answer was, is this new Constitution, this new nation, is it national or is it federal in nature? It would be national if the power resides with the national government. It would be federal if the power resides with sovereign states. So national would be national government, federal would be power with state governments. One of the problems for us today in understanding Madison is that the way in which we use terms today are a little different than the way in which he used them. So today, whenever we talk about the national government, we tend to use it interchangeably with federal government. So kind of today, when we talk about federal, we're talking about national. When we talk about states, we're talking about confederal. So his use of the word federal is the same as the word confederal that we use today, which can be a little confusing, different types of language used across generations. But his argument was national means it's national power, federal means state power. So just briefly, we'll have a couple minutes left. So just briefly, what he would argue is he would say, okay, let's look at how this new nation was put together and who adopted this constitution. Well, he argues this constitution was adopted by the states. The states had to ratify this constitution. So the constitution, the creation of the constitution was inherently federal in nature. So you shouldn't be afraid of that whatsoever. Now, that's a compelling argument to convince the Anti-Federalists to support the Constitution. The problem, though, is that he ended up sowing the seeds for the Civil War. Because then, 70, 80 years later, in the run-up to the Civil War, Southern states used that argument as a justification for seceding from the Union. They said, look at James Madison, Federalist 39. He said that we as states created the Union. So if we created the Union, then it is legal for us to then secede and leave the Union. Now, obviously, Madison could not foresee that. That wasn't his goal in writing it, but that kind of is what happened. And that really led to the run-up to the Civil War, at least a legal justification for those southern states to secede. He says, well, let's look at the power that's being exercised. And so we'll look at the president. Sure, the president will have power, but how do we select the president? We select the president through the Electoral College. How do we determine who serves in this Electoral College? State legislatures will determine those electors. So states, you get to control through the Electoral College who gets to be president. Well, in terms of the Senate, under the original Constitution, senators were not popularly elected. They were selected by state legislatures. So state legislatures, you get to pick who you send to the U.S. Senate. So it is very much federal in nature. The House of Representatives, that's more national because those members are going to be popularly elected. So Congress is a mixture of the two, national with the House and federal with the Senate and with the president. He says, let's look at how we amend the Constitution. With the Constitution, in order to amend the Constitution, that amendment must be ratified by state governments, by 3/4 of state governments, state legislatures. So therefore, you control how we change the Constitution. How does the Constitution get adopted to begin with? It has to be ratified by the states, 9 out of the 13 states. So again, you have control over ratifying this Constitution. So essentially, the conclusion that he comes to is this new Constitution, this new form of government, is neither wholly national nor is it wholly federal. It is a combination of the two concepts. And that, again, was done for the purpose of convincing the Anti-Federalists in New York to ratify the new Constitution. So that's one way they tried to get the Anti-Federalists on board. The other way, as we all know, was through the adoption of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. There were actually supposed to be 12 amendments in the Bill of Rights. 2 of those amendments did not get enough states to ratify them to then go into the Constitution. The First Amendment to the Constitution was supposed to limit the size of House districts to 50,000 residents. It's a good thing that didn't get ratified because if it would have gotten ratified, the size of the House of Representatives would be about 4,326 members today. Imagine getting over 4,000 people to agree to anything. So that one didn't get ratified. The Second Amendment was supposed to limit the ability of Congress to get a pay raise until there is an intervening election. That one also did not get the number of states to ratify to become part of the Bill of Rights. It would eventually get ratified 200 years later in 1992 and become the 27th Amendment to the Constitution. But we'll talk more about that next week when we talk about the Constitution. So the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, provide these freedoms and liberties to individuals to ensure that people retain these freedoms, and these freedoms belong to the people and do not belong to this new national government. So that's essentially what led us to the Constitution, the contract that we currently have today between the people and their government. It's 6:45, so we have to leave the conversation there. When we start up next week, we will pick up with this discussion and we'll start talking about the idea of power in government. We'll define power and we'll talk about how we limit power in our system of American government. Very quickly, due next week, you have Canvas essay number 1, looking at Federalist Paper number 10, and then you also have your initial skills self-assessment. Again, no credit on that one, no right or wrong answers, just an honest assessment of your skills as you enter the NPA program. Any last second questions or observations before we get out of here for the evening? Okay. If any questions occur to you between now and next Thursday, by all means, send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I look forward to reading Canvas essay number 1 as well as your initial assessment. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening and weekend. I'll talk to you next Thursday.
Have a good night, guys. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Excuse me, I have a question.